Okay, let's take a look at our first strategy for breaking apart a project. And again, I'm going to use this dinner time application that we used in the localization series. This isn't the biggest project, but it does have a handful of classes that we used while creating this. And while I did organize these into groups, it's not fully modular. There's nothing to stop me, for instance, from say this solid button type here to just reach off and store something in a database, or call the network, or do something that a control probably shouldn't really ever do. And that's because there's no physical boundary between these groups. They're just sort of organization for me. And I think this is the good first step, and it sort of guides me into what I might want to put in here. So let's start taking a look. We've got helpers with some date extensions, and this was actually a placeholder, and I think I ended up not needing this. But we'll just pretend that there's some date extensions in there. And then there's this localization type. And if you think about these two things, this one is certainly tied to this application, but this one is not. And so helpers is probably not the best name for this. In fact, localization probably just belongs somewhere else. So I'm going to move that out. But helpers certainly is something that we could reuse in other projects in the same company, or maybe it's something that you could reuse on different projects that you work on. And so extracting that out might be useful. We also have models, which are models that are specific to this application. Okay, so I'm going to create a new group here, and we're going to call this core. And what I want to do is create a new xcode project inside of here. And so I'm going to hit Command-Shift-N to create a new xcode project. And that project, I'm going to go over to iOS and pick framework. And here for our product name, I'm going to call this one util. So let's go make sure that the project gets added to this core folder. And I'm going to say that I want to add this to this particular project in that group. And we'll hit create. So now I have a core project with a util class or a util group inside of here. And for some reason, Xcode got a little bit confused by that. So I'm going to actually quit and relaunch it. Okay, now we can see everything looks good. We've got an info plist and a standard header file. You don't actually need this header file unless you're going to use some Objective-C stuff. So I'm actually just going to move that to trash. And if we end up doing a build on this util, there's actually nothing to build. But if you notice that it gives you an error, it may still be referencing that H file here. And in the build settings, we may want to go search to see if there's a reference to that file in here, like some sort of Objective-C bridging header or something like that. But it looks like everything was fine there. So now I want to take these helpers and I want to move them into util. So I'm going to just drag this folder and move it. Now, what's going to happen here is it's going to create groups and then add those to the util target, which is good. And it's important to note that looks like for some reason we ended up with two different references and we still have this one. So xcode is probably not going to help you very much along this process. And it may even help to go over to that particular project folder and just make sure that the folders that you're adding on disk actually contain the files we want. And in this case, you can see that it don't. Helper still exists here. So I'm actually going to back that out, just hit delete, remove references, and I'm going to just move this over into this util project here, or util group. So now you can see that deleted it there. We can go over here to util now and say add files to util. And now we can add the helper. It'll say copy items if needed, etc. And now we can add it like that. So now we have this date extension is now part of this util project. And if we want to use it externally, we just need to make this public. Okay. So that was pretty easy. And now we have a util project that we can open up separately. We can compile separately. We can have tests related to this. Whatever we need to do is part of this project. And then it's sort of nested inside this core group here. The next one I want to do is to take models and move these models into their own project. So I'm going to essentially do the same thing. I'm going to select core, Command-Shift-N to create a new project. I'm going to create a framework. I will name it models. And we might want to include tests in this one. So I'm going to do that. I've already selected the folder that we want and make sure that we add it to our dinner time project. And now we have models and models tests inside of here. And now I can take these two and drag them over. Now notice this time I'm dragging two files, not a group. So let's see if xcode is able to figure this out. So when I do that, and I go back over here, we have models, and it did copy those there. And it left the folder here, but it moved the files actually. So that is what we wanted. But what we want to do is delete this, and we're just going to say remove references. And I think, yes, that actually did delete the folder as well. So now those models got moved inside, and now we just need to make each one of these public like this so that we can use them outside of this type. And we need to do the same thing for meal type and the localized string here. Okay, so one thing we might find is that this .localized actually is using this localization thing, which belongs to a different target. If we look over here, our models belong to models, right? And our models don't depend on the application. But our localization here is providing all of the strings that we need so that we can localize this meal type here. And this is kind of a tight coupling that actually this probably shouldn't be here. This localized method probably should be declared externally. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to go over to localization for now. I don't have a better place to put this. And so I'm just going to have an extension on meal type. We'll move this in, close off the curly brace. It no longer needs to be public, but this does mean that now I need to import those models at the top here. So if I do a build now, I'm still building utils. Let's build models and make sure models builds. It does not. So we are looking at, looks like I don't need public on these actually, but I do need it here. Yes. Okay. So now models builds. And if we go back to our main application and we try to do a build, we're going to get a bunch of errors. And this is because our meal and our meal type don't exist in the main application target. They exist in a different target now. So when we go over to a file that uses our models, we will have to add import models at the top here. So I will just go through each one of these. Import models. Go into app state. Meal store already has it. Any others? Plan view controller needs it. Do another build. Got a scene delegate needs it because it sets up some. Yeah, so when you complete a walkthrough, it takes whatever you typed in and creates a meal for that. Let's see. In meal form view controller, we need to add models there. And let's see, where else? We added it there. Let's do another build. Not quite sure what this is complaining about now, but let's just move on because that'll probably become more obvious. The meal itself, this is a case where we have a struct that's public, which means you can use it and you can access these properties, but you can't create it without a public initializer. So let's right click on this, say refactor, generate member-wise initializer, and I will move this below the properties, make it public, and now we should be able to create the meal. Okay, where else are we missing? Let's make sure models builds correctly, and then go back over to dinner time and do a build. And now it's working. So you notice there that it was sort of out of had an inconsistent state. And we never really specifically said that our application depends on the models project. In fact, if I go over to dinner time, you can see down here for the frameworks, libraries, and embedded content, you can add models here and util so that it depends on it. And when you do a build, it should build the dependent things first. But with Swift and the xcode being a little bit, they're trying to be smart about the dependencies. When I do this, sort of signifies that we depend on this and it should go build it first. But for some reason, it sometimes gets out of date. Another thing that you may want to check if it is not working for you is to go over to this build step. And right here, there's this find implicit dependencies. And this is what will trigger the build for all of the things that you depend on. But if you really, really need this to be built ahead of time, if for some reason Xcode isn't working, you can do that. But I find that's more of a last resort. Okay, so now we have our application working and we've extracted 2 projects that are completely isolated and separate, can be tested independently. I can do whatever I need to inside of here. Let's actually delete models.h because I'm not going to need that. Move to trash. And okay, what is next? Let's take a look at this store. And store is really going to be sort of in a, let's make a new group called persistence. Because I want to have things like caching. There may be, other related things, not just a meal store, but maybe there's another type of store. I don't know. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to create a new Xcode project again. Again, it's going to be an iOS framework, and we will call this store. And in this case, we may want to include tests. Again, I'm going to exclude it just to make the example a little bit cleaner, but you get the idea that you can quite easily add tests for each one of these projects. So we're going to add it to dinner time in the correct group and hit create. I will delete the H file, move to trash. And now I want to move these guys into here. And again, I'm going to drag the files, not the group, so that it copies correctly. And then here now I can delete and remove references. And I believe, let's double check, that if I go to persistence, we have a store with the store group and it has the stuff we need. And if we look at here, is there a store folder? There is. I'm not quite sure what happened there. Let's just delete the files there. Okay. So now let's take a look at this. We've got meal store, app state, and storage. Well, meal store certainly depends on models, which we already set up here. And we're going to need to make basically a lot of these things public. So we've got public here for the meal store class. We need to be able to set the meals publicly. We need to be able to create one of these. Call this function, call update, call add, call remove, load, save, and clear. So let's move over to store so that we can make sure that we can compile this stuff. And it can't be declared public because storage is not public. So moving on to storage, this is essentially a class that takes any T that's codable and will store it at this file name. So let's continue. We will make the public things public. And this is one of the reasons why I think that sort of, you don't necessarily have to start every project like this, but if you decide to go down this approach, it's good to recognize it kind of early on so you don't have like a huge mess to untangle and a whole lot of things to make public. It's better to think about these things as you go. Okay, so now we can build our store. And now if we go over here and look at app state really, it's not really the best name for this. And it sort of is deciding like where on the file system things should go, or at least what the file name should be. And I don't think this actually belongs here at all. This was put into this group because it seemed related, but I think this is more of an application concern. And so I'm actually going to take app state and just move it over here. So now app state is going to depend on storage. And if we open this up, just make sure that the target membership got set correctly when we moved it out of one project and into the other. Okay, so it says no such model storage. Let's go back over here and do a full build. And let's see, does it? No, it doesn't want to do that. So I'm going to go back over to dinner time. The application, the application will go down to where we're building things and make sure that store is added there. And let's see, it still does not like that. Oh, it's not storage, it's store. Okay, so now we've got core and we've got persistence. Core has those two projects. Persistence has our store project. And we're able to do a full build. Great. Okay, there's one more sort of set of projects that I want to create, and that's going to be related to the style and the controls that we're using. So let's create a new group. I will create it like this, and we're going to call this UI. I will move it down just below that. Okay, so we're going to create a new Xcode project here. I'm going to pick framework again. We're going to call this style guide. And style guide is going to go up one level and into the UI group. We will make sure and add it, hit create. Okay, so for style guide, let's delete the header that we don't need, and we can start moving things into the style guide. So style, UI kit theme, and UI font, app font. So things that are related to styling our application. So I'm going to do that, copy items if needed, and then we can right click and delete. And I think I need to move to trash. Yes, that's correct. And these things now need to be public. So we do public there and public here. And I think I need public on this static there. Okay, so now it doesn't know where this .app font thing is. So let's go ahead and import style guide. And let's make sure that we add it here. Okay, and we have one more to do, import style guide. Let's see, let's move this. File app_state.swift is part of module store ignoring import. It actually is not, but do you see what happened here? It put it in the wrong folder. Let's see. No. Dinner time app state. It thinks the location is there, and it's not. I'm actually going to just say remove references. Let's go over here and find it in this list. Should be, is it in persistence store? No, it's not. So Xcode was, again, confused. I have yet, after doing this many, many times, I've yet to find a consistent set of steps that makes Xcode not confused. Okay, so I'm going to take this and hold on to it, drag it back into our project, and do that. And now, where did it go? I don't see it. Yeah, we don't want that to be in here. We want to delete, remove reference for that. And then this one somehow got into this group, which I don't want. Move it out. There we go. Okay, is this in the correct place? It is. Now, when I do a build, it should avoid that warning. Okay. Now that I have the style guide project with this guy, it's actually quite nice to go over here and say, like, wouldn't it be nice for me to go over here and create an iOS application that is going to demo the style guide? So this could be style guide demo. Let's call it style guide demo, and it'll be a Swift UI app, and we will hit finish. So now we have a style guide demo with this .app, and what do we have inside a style guide? We've got a font. And let's say we also wanted to have some colors. So let's say we create, let's see, like color plus branding or something like that. And here I'm going to use only UI kit in this file. But if you wanted to use Swift UI, that would be fine. Just remember that if you depend on this project, you depend on all the things that this depends on. And so this being a UI kit application, I may want to use Swift UI to demo certain things a little easier, but my colors are actually going to be UI colors. So I'm actually going to, let's change the name of it. UI color plus branding. We'll make an extension, and we will fix up that comment. This will be a public extension on UI color. And let's say we have a static var brand primary color, which is a UI color. And I don't know what this is going to equal, but we're just going to make one up. So we'll do 65% red, 8% blue, and 82% blue. Sure, why not? I have no idea what color that is, some sort of purple. Okay, so now we've got our brand primary color that we can use from everywhere else. And let's say we have like multiple colors for like, this is what it looks like in dark mode and light mode. And this is our primary, secondary, and tertiary label colors in light and dark mode or whatever. And so now inside of our style guide demo, I can say that I want to use, let's use a rectangle. Well, first Z stack. We'll put that text in there with a foreground color of white. And then I will use color with the UI color. And there it is. And this one needs to import our style guide module so that it can say UI color.brand primary. Let's do a build. If I switch over now to style guide demo and do a build, here we go. Compiling for iOS 14, but style guide has a minimum deployment target of 14.5. So do we really want that to have a minimum deployment target of 14.5? Probably not. This is something, when you think about dependencies, if your application depends on iOS 13, let's say, then we're going to want all of our dependencies to have that. Yeah, so something to keep in mind when you're creating these. So, and it's interesting, when you create this, it creates the max deployment version. And when you create this one, it creates the minimum of the most recent version, which I find kind of interesting. Okay, so now back on content view, can I build now? I should be able to. No such module style guide. Let's make sure that that builds. Again, I find that this automatic stuff sometimes requires you to switch between these and do the build. And if you keep having to do that, sometimes I find that just going in here and adding the frameworks and embedded content and adding style guide in there will help resolve that issue. Okay, so now in the style guide demo, for our content view, we've got a UI color brand primary. So now if I actually run this application, we will get a demo application which can show our style guide stuff in action. And this is where I would show like color swatches for all the different example colors and things like that. Okay, and there is our brand primary color, our interesting looking purple color. Okay, so that is a demo app, and it is self-contained to this project. And when we import the style guide framework from our main project, we don't need to worry about grabbing all of the things that this has in it. So we may have a lot of demo content, images, and that sort of thing. And that can all live inside of here, but not be shipped with our final product, which is great. Okay, let's close that off. And let's see, what else do we want to do? We want to move the controls into here as well. Okay, so now I want to, let's see, let's just make a controls framework. And we'll do that. Put it right alongside there. Yes, sounds good. And these don't have to live inside of your the same directory structure. They could be siblings. You could have them in a separate Git repo if you wanted to, but this certainly makes it nice and easy. We will delete the H file, which we don't need, and we will move these guys over, copy them, and delete this, move to trash, and we will have to make a whole bunch of stuff public now. This will be public. Okay, and did we use any of our app font? Yes, we did. So we will import style guide here. Let's go over to solid button. Just moving along, marking things public. I sort of feel like there should be a refactoring for this step. And did we use app font in here? We did. So let's import style guide again. Okay, moving on to padded view. I'm actually going to move over to controls so we can actually see it working. And ooh, here we found our first problem. We want to import SnapKit in this one. Let's make sure. Let's continue with the public stuff that we want to set here. And I think that's all good. So now, what do we do about SnapKit? If we recall in the previous example, in dinner time had, in the actual project here, we had Swift packages, and this is SnapKit, and it is 5.0.1 is the version. I don't think there's any easy way for me to copy this, and there's no way for me to tell this other project to use this one. And so that's not great. It's not really what I want. What I want to be able to do is go over here and say, yeah, can you please use the Swift package from the other project? So if I go over here to this and I say SnapKit, well, it doesn't know what I'm talking about, which is kind of strange. So we have to go into this project, Swift packages, and we're going to have to add it. So that was https github.com snapkit/snapkit, and it will go download it. And just to show how this is working, let's say I want only version 4, and so I get the version number wrong. It will tell me now that, oh, I have conflicting dependencies, which is good, but it also would be nice if it just could say, grab the one from the other project. And it did not remember this, so let's add it again. SnapKit, SnapKit. This time we're going to use the most recent version and hit OK, link it to this controls target. And there we go. Now we've got SnapKit in here. And if I do a build, let's make sure that we make everything that we need to public. And now our build succeeds. So now we've got SnapKit in 2 different places. But you saw one of the kind of downsides is we have to link it manually every time we do this. Okay, so now let's move back over to our main application target, and let's see what is breaking now. So we've got, let's see, we've got some sort of module map swift.h not found, which is interesting. Make sure models is building. It is. Let's make sure stores is building. It is. Okay. Now we're getting real errors. Here we need to import style guide and also controls. And I will copy those two. Let's see, that's plan view controller. Let's move on to meal form view controller. We'll add those two there. And okay, again, we're running into this problem. Let's see, what is the problem? Cannot find dashed border button in scope. That should be right here. Did I not make it public? I forgot to. Let's make that public. Okay, so public on all of the initializers, overridden functions. There we go. Okay. Do another build. And all right, I think that I'm going to just get in the habit of always having to add them here. So we need controls. There we go. Now in the controls module, I would also make a demo application that showed an individual exhibit of all of the different controls. Like here is a padded view and here's how you use it. Here is the 3 different buttons that we have in this application, and here's their different states. Here's the highlighted state and the press down state, and maybe you have some animations or things like that, and you can demo those animations. And this is a great way for you to work and iterate by just selecting, to use style guide demo as an example, just selecting the scheme in the editor and just build and run. You don't have to build the whole world to do that because these are isolated to just UIKit and the style guide so that you can get colors and fonts and things. Okay, let's see what else. We have, go back over to dinner time, make sure that we can build, and we can. And now if I run this, we're running the dinner time application, but we split apart a lot of the pieces into separate modules to get the benefits that we talked about, but along the way we had to fight xcode a little bit and Swift Package Manager to get it to work, but you can see that it is working. So following this strategy can help you to break apart your application into smaller pieces, and I think that has a lot of benefits. So what we saw is that we can open up this main workspace or this main project and build everything in one place. And we can build each piece independently. And if we need to, we can create example projects or test projects to test those pieces in isolation. So some of the things that aren't great about this approach are having to do the Swift Package Manager step multiple times and making sure their versions are consistent. And if you needed to use CocoaPods for this approach, it would be a little bit painful because CocoaPods really wants to work with one project and it wants to generate your workspace. And so you can see that we have multiple projects here. If we did that, then we would have to essentially have a pod file per project. And then each project would come with its own pods-based workspace. And I don't think this would be a really good approach if you're using CocoaPods. Maybe if you're using Carthage, it might be, actually, I'm not quite sure if that would be easier either, because you would essentially have to manually integrate libraries between each one of these. And, I don't think that would be a good solution. So if you're using Swift Package Manager, this isn't so bad. If you're not using any dependency manager, this works just fine. But just keep those things in mind. Okay. And that's it for nested Xcode projects. In the next one, we'll take a look at a different strategy.